The first chapter of the comic starts with the birth of the second child of the Lakewood family. The people in the room wondered what color he would show everyone. The magic attribute he has will show its color on the glass sphere. And so the baby's hand was touched to the glass sphere. As his hand touched the glass sphere, everyone in the room was shocked. And so the story begins. The main character was introducing himself. My name is Kiyama Zenichi. After graduating high school, I became a reluctant office worker at a black business. However, looks like I died in a traffic accident, and the child I saved at that time turned out to be a god. The child Kiyama had saved was speaking to him, while they both seemed to be in an otherworldly realm. I'm sorry, I don't understand why, but it seems you were born in the wrong world. Up until now, you must have lived an unfortunate life to have been rejected by a world that doesn't fit you. So I'll send you to the world you were supposed to be born in, which is definitely compatible, so it will be more convenient for you. Kiyama continued his thoughtful introduction. And like that, my second life began in another world filled with hope. But back in the room, the glass sphere had just revealed the baby's color after being touched by him. Why did our Lakewood family give birth to a baby with the color black? The people present in the room whispered to themselves in shock as one said, "The appraisal result black is a dark attribute." That means someone else completed the sentence with a shocked gasp. I didn't expect our family would give birth to a demon baby. The fully self-conscious baby wondered, I'm a demon, he thought in shock as the man in the room, who appeared to be the father, declared, This child is the stain of the whole family. Let's just pretend it was never born. The woman who was lying in bed and carrying another baby in her arms agreed with him. She said, That's right. We also have Leo. Just say it died when it was born. The baby was shocked and dismayed. Wait, will I be killed? Oh my God, why is this even more unfortunate than my old world? He thought as the man loomed over him. The next scene cuts to a man and a woman looking down at the baby as they cooed over him. What a lovely baby. This will be your new home. The baby wondered where he was, and he realized that he had been adopted as a child by his uncle. He began wailing, relieved that he was still alive. His new parents soothed him. They talked about how the sun was shining again even after it had rained the previous night and decided to call him Kyle. It meant sun in the ancient language. The baby Kyle also seemed to be pleased with his new name. He thought to himself that just like that, his second life had turned a new page in that family with those two. 5 years later, Kyle's mother called out to him, and he responded, I'm coming now, mother. Kyle's full name was Kyle Flayfield. His father was Demio Flayfield, and his mother was Claire Flayfield. That particular day was a family day that took place several times a year. Kyle and his parents had brought 2 night guardians with them and set off. Kyle was 5 years old that year, so that time, they went to a city farther than usual. His parents informed him that the city they were going to was Eris. Kyle replied that he was looking forward to it. Kyle mused to himself that it had been 5 years since the night he was reborn, and he had grown up normally under the care of a gentle and sweet father and mother. He had not forgotten about that night, and so he had learned about the world and about magic. In the world he was in, there were 8 magic attributes: earth, water, fire, wind, thunder, ice, dark, and light. Basically, each person would have one attribute. Attribute appraisal was usually done right after birth and had a great influence on that person's fate. That attribute would reflect on the glass sphere by color. The attribute type for water would be blue. Fire attribute would be red. Kyle's appraisal result was black. The dark attribute uses the magic of the demons. He had worriedly wondered that if his father and mother were to know that, would he be again? However, his parents assured him that he didn't have to worry about that color thing. He realized that they had already known about it and, despite that, had chosen to adopt him. Kyle was snapped out of his thoughts when his father spoke to him. As he sat between his parents, happy, he thanked the God who had given him his new life. As they continued traveling, Kyle noted that he could feel something ominous ahead and that he had felt uneasy in his heart since they had entered the forest. Suddenly, he yelled out to his father, asking him to stop the carriage. When asked what was wrong, Kyle replied, In front of this road, there's a fair amount of magic beasts. His parents listened to him, and they decided to take a detour. Suddenly, Kyle noted that the magic beasts were attacking humans and ran out of the forest. As his parents called out to him, he informed them and said, I have to go save them. As they anxiously called out for him to get back to the carriage, he solemnly told them that he was already able to use magic. With his magic, he then built a barrier of the wind, asking them to stay where they were before riding off on a horse, determined to save the humans. The beasts turned out to be goblin mages, orcs, 3 ogres, and a forest wolf. It turned out that they were attacking guards who were protecting the carriage that seemed to have a princess in it. Just then, Kyle appeared, and although it was his first time using magic, he was able to defeat the beasts, shocking the guards as he used wind, light, water, and thunder magic. They were utterly surprised and, along with the princess in the carriage, wondered who he was. Kyle left and returned to his parents. The guards chastened him, and one confessed that he had followed Kyle and told them what he had seen. We also wouldn't have been their opponents, but Kyle Sama used wind, water, and thunder magic. He destroyed them in a flash. His parents were surprised and asked if it was true. Kyle replied, I'll explain everything when we get home, about his magic power and the secret of the black glass square. After Kyle explains his magic power, getting a shocked reaction from his parents and the Knight's Guardian, he apologizes to them and tells them that they should go home first. In Flayfiled's training field, Kyle's parents watched as a maid approached them, carrying a tray of water balls as Kyle had requested. He picked up one of the water balls and explained the magic to his parents. Please, consider this water ball a glass sphere. He continued to demonstrate as he explained. His parents watched in dismay as the water balls turned a beautiful blue, and he performed all the other magic. Kyle's father recalled what Max had told him, and then asked his wife what other magic meant. Max had already explained to him the 3 attributes: wind, water, and lightning. It seems to Kyle's mother that her husband was correct. So, how exactly is Kyle able to use so many different kinds of magic? As Kyle went on with his demonstration, his parents became even more shocked, as they couldn't believe he was able to use the 5 attributes. His father questioned him as he proceeded with his explanation after coming to his conclusion. The color of all attributes when mixed, and then the water ball that has no color will be dyed black? Before answering his parents, Kyle just stared at them for a while. The glass sphere was also mixed with all colors like that. That is why it turned out to be black, like the color of the dark attribute. His parents gazed at him in surprise, his mother still finding it unbelievable, while his father thought hard for a time. He then called his name. Kyle, I understand that you can use all those attributes, but when exactly did you learn all those magics? Kyle took out an old book before responding to his father. That is because I discovered a very interesting book in your library. I borrowed and followed it. When his father saw the book, he was shocked and wondered if it wasn't Razak's. He said that he now knew everything and that Razak was an old buddy. Kyle was astonished when he learned about his father's friendship with the author. That's fantastic. Does that mean you and the author of this book know each other? His mother interrupts, wondering if that wasn't nostalgic. Kyle looked at the book with a smile. This book, for a beginner, it starts with interpretation. For intermediate, it is finding a way, and for the advanced level, it indicates more expansion. What a great book. His father was overjoyed with his son's appraisal of the book, saying that he wished he could let the owner hear the words. One of the maids interrupts them and addresses Kyle's father as Master, notifying him of a visitor. Kyle's father was shocked that they had a visitor at the moment and asked the maid who it was. Before the maid could respond, an exquisitely dressed woman entered wearing a large black hat that covered her eyes. An old friend came to visit like this, but the master put on a face as if he was bothered. Isn't that too rude? Kyle's father immediately recognized the woman. Long time no see, how are you? Kyle realized that the woman was an elf and was surprised as he was lost in thought. There are many races in this world, but among them, elves are very rare and have lived for a very long time. Moreover, the amount of their magic power overshadows any other races. Kyle's mother addresses the woman as Maluna-san, stating that it has been a long time since they have seen each other. Kyle's father questions Maluna if she has traveled from the Great Forest and how long it has taken. Maluna replies that he and his wife are still quite happy together. Her focus shifts to Kyle, who inquires about him. Kyle's parents hug him, introduce him as their son, and showered him with adulation. Mulina was so surprised to learn that Kyle was their son, and Kyle's father encouraged his son not to be shy because Mulina was the author of the book he read. Mulina saw the book and informed Kyle that she had written it a long time ago. Kyle thanked her for the book, describing how it helped him study magic. Mulina then asked Kyle if he enjoyed magic. Kyle was overjoyed as he answered her inquiry. Yes, I really like it, his father interrupts. That's correct. My son is an expert at magic. His mother also pitched in. He can use a lot of different magic. Mulina inquired if this was true, and Kyle's parents requested that their son show Melina and surprise her. Melina thought to herself as she saw them. "I didn't expect those two to be such stupid parents," she said, before asking Kyle to show her his magic. Ready to see Kyle's power, she emphasized that he only needed to utilize it to attack her with everything he had. Kyle followed her instructions and asked her how much power he should use to attack. Kyle was shocked by her response, as she intended him to attack with full force and the magic he was finest at. Kyle acknowledged what she stated, and the two began fighting. As the conflict became more fierce, Melina wondered what was going on and why the entire atmosphere was shaking. Kyle attacked Melina with all 8 of his magical attributes at the same moment, which shocked her. She was shocked to see him mix the 8 attributes with her strength to create the strongest spear. She saw Kyle's family rooting for him and realized how horrible it was. She cried at Kyle to wait a minute, but he had already used the spell, the Arrow of Spears. As Kyle fired the arrow of 8 attributes at Melina Rizak, she was frazzled but was able to summon 3 spirits to defend her. The attacks ended in an explosion that caused dust to be everywhere. Kyle appeared from the dust and used the wind to clear away all the dust and return the earth to how it was. Melina Rizak was contemplative of Kyle and his power. Later, Kyle, his parents, and Melina Rizak were seated around a table. Melina Rizak thought to herself that Kyle seemed like a normal child. "Democlaire, I ask you again, who exactly is he?" she asked his parents. "He's our child," they replied simply. Melina Rizak stared at them nonplussed, and when she saw that they were not going to say anything more, she gave up. "I see. I won't ask about that again. Sorry for asking such a silly question." Kyle's parents assured her that it was okay, praising Kyle as a genius at magic and a good kid who works hard. They said they were sure everyone would want to ask the question Melina had asked. Melina thought to herself that they were such stupid parents. She then asked if they wanted Kyle to attend the National Magic Academy. Kyle perked up in eagerness. Melina then continued speaking, informing them that it was a place to learn and improve magic, a place to make friends, and a place where political power could be obtained. She then turned to Kyle. "Kyle, do you want to test your talent against other famous students gathered from all over the country in the Magic Academy?" Kyle eagerly replied that he wanted to go. His parents chimed in, saying that if it was what he wanted, they would let him go, and that he would definitely become the center of attention out of all the students. As Kyle ran to hug his parents in gratitude, Melina thought to herself that the two of them must be very sad at that moment. Melina then informed them that Kyle would have to find a tutor until he got into the academy. Kyle declared that he wanted Melina, and when she tried to refuse, he persuaded her. "I learned all about magic from this book. However, I still don't understand a lot of things, so if I could learn more about magic from anyone, then it's definitely, I want to learn from the person who wrote this book." Melina, thinking that his power might be too much for others, agreed to be his tutor, warning him that even if he was her friend's child, she would still be strict with him. "Yes, I look forward to your teaching," Kyle replied. Kyle's father called to him that the carriage had called to pick him up while his mother fussed over him. Kyle was now 12 years old. As Kyle left the house, he saw Melina standing outside. "Master, you came to see me off." "Of course, because today is the day my only disciple leaves," she replied. "I have taught you everything I can. For the rest, just believe in yourself and try your best." Kyle thanked her for teaching him, and then he noticed that she had placed a wind sound block, not wanting his parents to hear as she said, "This is not an encouragement to my disciple. Listen to it as a message to someone with power. There are many dark forces lurking in this world that cannot be seen on the surface. Those dark forces will gradually become stronger and appear in many places. I hope you don't forget that." "Yes, I will remember it, Master," he replied. She then gave him a bracelet to wear, telling him to keep it safe. Kyle's parents then cut in, wanting to say goodbye to their son. Kyle turned to them, overwhelmed by emotions, as he thought of how they had happily accepted him despite being abandoned by his parents and taking care of him like their own child all this time. He also thought of how he hadn't done anything to repay their favor, and yet the two of them were still happy to see him off to school. Ugh, that's weird. There are so many things I want to say, but now I can only say, thank you, Mom and Dad, for raising me until today. His parents broke down into tears and hugged him fiercely. As he waved goodbye to everyone from the carriage, he was thinking, the things the three of you have taught me, the love you've given me, I will never forget them. From now on, I will be on my own. Let's go to the National Magic Academy. The academy was located in the royal capital and was established and operated by the state. Kyle leaves Master Minola's training and heads to the National Magic Academy. It was the top magic academy. Throughout its lengthy history, the institution has had a tremendous impact in all sectors, training countless talents from the nation's center to be soldiers and knights. It was a place to learn about magic while also demonstrating your powers, a place to attend political meetings, and a place to meet new people. At that point, another individual knocked on the door, and his name was Kyle Flayfield. The color reflected in his glass sphere was black, indicating that he was the only person in the world with the power of all magical abilities. Inside the academy main hall, the students were assembled in the main hall and a woman addressed them. And now, new students, you will be divided into different classes and take the tests. There are 3 types of tests: the total amount of magic power, the ability to control magic power, and the strength of magic power. These tests will decide which class you enter, from rank A to F. The woman continued, "At the National Magic Academy, strength is everything. As long as you get into the upper class, your academic life will be optimal. And if you go to the lower class, please try your best." The woman then conducted the test from the room in order. 2 students got concerned about being assigned to a lower class and exchanged words. "What should I do if I get into lower class?" Another one asked again, "So it is dangerous not to get to the upper class?" Kyle watched them as they were all apprehensive, wondering what the test would entail, but yet feeling very excited. It was Kyle's turn to enter the room for his test. The examiner called out his name and instructed him to place his hand on top of the test machine so that his index could be measured. Then the machine's eyes lighted up, prompting the examiners to panic and wonder what was going on. Its eyes lit up! "Hey you, what did you do?" Kyle was surprised, wondering what happened. And then his result was out, and it was an F. Because the test machine was broken, the test was postponed, and Kyle thought to himself, "I did not do anything." The next examination took place in Exam Hall 2, and the proctor addressed Kyle. "And next is the magic control test. The score is decided by how many are hit with magic within the time limit." He then asked Kyle again if he was relaying. Kyle told him yes, and as he was about to start his exam, he remembered what Manila had told her. "Kyle, before you enter the academy, I have something to remind you. Even though you can use all the attributes at that academy, it's better to hide them as much as possible. In case it's not urgent, just use wind magic, okay?" He also remembered that the target was 200 pieces, and then he decided to use just a little bit of his magic. After a while, he achieved his target score of A, and then dropped all of the targets. He approached the proctor, informed him that it was completed, and inquired about his score. Kyle was astonished to learn that his score was only 1, and the proctor explained why. This counter receives signals when they are destroyed by those targets. Maybe it was because they were all destroyed at the same time. "I'm sorry, but the counter's result is prioritized." Kyle then moved on to the next examination hall, room 3. He was addressed by another examiner who told him what to do. His next exam involved attacking a golem using magic. Kyle then asked the proctor if it was acceptable to use his force. "I'm afraid it will break," the proctor replied to him. "You are worrying too much. How can you destroy this golem? It's built to be strong enough to withstand even my magic. With the magic power of children like you, it's nothing," Kyle replied to him. "Then I will trust you." And then, he began his 3rd examination. He realized the compression of magic power, and he thought to himself, "At least I have to get good marks on one test. Otherwise, I will not be able to face my master who taught me for so long." Kyle launched his windfang, shaking the entire building. Everyone in the building felt the entire rumbling, thinking that there had been a tremor. The proctor was so surprised to see the entire place scattered. He realized that Kyle's magic power strength test score result was immeasurable. The proctor stared at him and then told him not to bother breaking the golem, explaining that it was almost time for the class division speech and that he should hurry and get back to the lobby. Kyle thanked him. When Kyle left the hall, a woman named Freya walked in, telling the proctor about the loud explosion. "Even the teacher's room heard it. This looks interesting. I wonder what that kid is like." The proctor replied to her, He looks like a normal kid. Some will think he is weak, but that was a big mistake. Even the counter is broken, so the points can't be tallied, but magic power that can destroy the golem to this extent, I have never seen before. I don't know how many people recognized it in the test. That boy is a monster," Freya replied to him. "If that is the case, maybe he will be in my class. I'm looking forward to it." When the results came out, Kyle was given an F class, but he was not dismayed. He headed joyfully to his class. thinking to himself that it was a good thing one could acquire knowledge in any class. Kyle got to the building, which was a wooden, decrepit-looking building. Campus F was separated from the surroundings, creating an extremely stuffy atmosphere. When Kyle entered the class, he noted that it was really different from other classes. Just then, a female student walked in. She looked utterly dejected as she took a seat beside Kyle. Kyle was concerned. Are you okay?" he asked. With her eyes downcast, the girl replied, "Hick, just ignore me. It's just that I'm the daughter of a noble, but I have no talent for magic at all, and I was placed in the lowest class." Kyle was surprised at her statement. Other students began to walk into the class, also looking utterly dejected, just like the girl. Kyle noted that everyone looked so depressed. The girl continued speaking, saying that what she was about to say would not make any sense if he had not been born into a noble family. "Is that so?" Kyle asked. The girl continued speaking, explaining why they were all so dejected. "We, the children of nobles, received magic talent education from an early age, so we should have been in better classes. And yet, we fell into the worst class. If it continues like this, everyone will be ashamed to face their parents and their family." Kyle then understood. It is said that most of the students in the academy were descendants of the royal family and nobles. So if you fell into a bad class, it would affect the dignity of your family too. However, Kyle was confused as he stared at the girl. This little girl said, "I have no talents." Just now, however, the amount of magic she possesses is definitely larger than the other girls, he thought to himself. He addressed the girl, trying to encourage her. "We're both in F class now, but maybe just like the better classes, we will also be taught by the best teachers. Just make an effort. Maybe you can find some new talent?" The girl turned to look at him in shock. Kyle exclaimed joyfully that she had finally looked at him and introduced himself, saying that he looked forward to studying with her. The girl, stammering and yelling at the same time, introduced herself as Kitty Frederick. She was surprised to see Kyle as she wondered why he was appearing in front of her eyes again. She thought about how she had not been able to find him, even though she had looked for him all over the capital. She noted his features: soft silver hair, his golden eyes which sparkled with soft light, as if he could see through everything. "That's right. He is the same person who saved me and my soldiers from the goblins that night 7 years ago. He is the one who saved my life," she thought to herself. She began to ask him if he remembered her, but was interrupted by a very loud voice screaming, "Keep silent!" Everyone was shocked by the loud voice accompanied by wind blasts. The lady who had yelled then addressed them, saying, "You all have weak spirits. That's why you ended up in F class. I'm your head teacher, Freya. Let's help each other." She was Freya Arufana, and she had the attributes of fire and wind. She noted that there was a student at the back of the class who did not seem to be afraid of her voice. She checked the records to see who it was, and saw that it was Kyle, the guy who had broken the golem model. Kyle, meanwhile, seemed impressed by how she had put magic power into her voice, thinking that it was as expected from a lecturer at the academy. Freya then began to speak rudely and dismissively to the students in the class. "By the way, what's with your pathetic faces? Honestly, just like F class years ago." The students were taken aback. "If you aren't satisfied, let me know. You don't like this tattered wooden campus? Or you just can't stand your family's reputation being tarnished because you fell into the F class? But there's no other way, right? This is an academy to train elite mages, and you guys really are the losers in the magic world." The students were clearly dismayed by her words. Kyle stared at his classmates, who looked even more dejected than before, with some beginning to sob. But Freya wasn't done. "Still, you have to make an effort and try to study. However, don't forget one thing. No matter how hard you try, F class will always be F class." "Got it." Kyle stood up and raised his hand to speak. "Can I say a few words, Ms. Freya?" Freya wondered if he was going to object and asked him to speak his mind. "I have the same opinion as you. I think that excellent students should obviously get more favor." This dismayed Kaidi and angered his classmates, who thought that he was fawning at the teacher. Kyle continued, "Next, I have a question. If we can prove that we're better, will the academy change the way it treats us?" Freya scoffed and mocked him, telling him that no matter how much effort they put into developing, there was no way they would ever catch up. Hundreds of students have had the same reckless dream and failed. Even after going through bloody training, they still can't beat students from the advanced class. With that being said, in the magic world, talent is a prerequisite factor. Kyle refused to accept that, saying that they would be the first F class to break that talent order. Freya was outraged. Very interesting. If that miracle really happens, then even if I have to risk my life, I will negotiate with my superiors. Kitty looked shocked, but Kyle only smiled. I look forward to your help. The Royal Magic Academy shared dormitories for male and female students. Kyle was looking for a luxurious dormitory. This is the student dormitory that I will be staying in for the next 3 years. What a wonderful building, he continued looking around. Oh, the common room. As expected, the furniture is also really luxurious. Just then, he noticed some students fighting. Turk punched Delia, and the other students watched the entire incident unfold. Delia, holding his cheeks as he cried, explained that he was just sitting and asked why he had to take her punch. Turk replied to him, "Don't you know? Because you are Class 1F, the atmosphere will be contaminated," Delia replied. "Even if it's A class, that's too harsh." Turk became so angry. "You can still argue. You really need to be educated," Kyle intervened, just as she was about to punch Delia again, asking Delia if he was in the same class as him. He introduced himself to him, as did Delia. Turk was furious because she remembered Kyle saying wonderful things to Miss Freya. "You are also an F class. Gather so that I can teach you guys," Turk yelled out as she tried to punch them. However, Kyle used his magic on her, telling her that it was dangerous since she suddenly swung at him. Other students in Class A watched the scene unfold and started yelling at Turk. "Turk, what are you doing? Don't let F class show you up," one of them said. Turk yelled back at them, "That's so annoying, I know that." Kyle stared at Turk. "Your name is Turk." Turk stared at him angrily, and Kyle wondered why Turk punched Delia. Turk's friends were becoming impatient and asked her what she was doing. Turk told them that it was fine, and then Sir Sykes approached them. Delia was surprised to see him. "Sir Sykes, that old Delightful family's son?" Kyle asked him if he knew him. Everyone knew the old Delight family was a great family that trained many magic swordsmen. It was said that year, a genius from that prestigious family entered the academy, and that was Sykes's old Delight. Kyle stared at Sykes and wondered if he was the prestigious family genius. Sykes started, pointing a finger at Turk. "I'm not complaining about F class using this common room. The problem just now was also created by this idiot." Turk told him that it wasn't like that. Sykes continued, "But at the same time, there's someone using magic here. Who would that be?" Everyone wondered who used magic. Sykes yelled out and explained, "He knocked him down with wind and threatened him with words containing magic power. Isn't that right?" Kyle realized that Sykes noticed him using the magic, and as he was about to explain how he had tried to hide it, Turk cut in. "Using magic stealthily like that, you play dirty, you bastard." Sykes turned to her. "Stop it. You should feel ashamed that you could not see through it," he continued. "However, it is hard to believe that the skill to deceive the eyes of the elite, A class, is only an F class." He then approached Kyle and asked him who exactly he was. Just then, the dormitory manager, Water Glacia, approached them, telling them to stop and asking what exactly the fuss was all about. Kyle told the manager that both Turk and Sykes insulted his friend, and because of that, he was upset. He continued, "I want Turk to apologize to Delia, and that's all." Turk became furious, yelling that Delia should apologize to her. Water told them she'd listen to their stories later, then told them to relax and went back to their room. Leah then interrupted Water, telling her that this was not good. "Think carefully. Aren't they energetic freshmen?" Leah then initiated a battle between Kyle and Sykes. Kyle found it interesting, but other students yelled at him, telling him that he was no match for Sykes and that he should run away. Turk approached Kyle, telling him that he must get out of the academy if he lost, and that commoners like him didn't deserve to go to such an academy. Kyle's then asked her what would happen if he won. She replied to him, "Then Sykes must go to F class." Sykes asked Turk if everything would be okay if he apologized, but she then asked him what he was talking about. They eventually agreed on the battle as a bet, with Kyle warning Turk not to backtrack on her words. Sykes then informed Kyle that it appeared that he was still misunderstanding and asked him if he truly believed he could win. Kyle confidently replied to him, "Of course." The students joined the bet, and Leah announced that it had been decided and then told the audience to go to the rehearsal room. With that, the battle between the A class and the F class was about to start. Kyle thought to himself, the opportunity to show strength came quickly. F class was unconfident, and A class was exultant. In front of their eyes were Kyle and Sykes as they prepared to fight. They were all at the indoor rehearsal ground, where the battle would take place. Kyle wondered to himself if the small building would be okay, but he was quickly shocked when he walked in to see a huge expanse of space. Head teacher Raygot boasted about the building. Surprised! The indoor rehearsal ground is the facility created by Spazio, one of the founders of the Academy, and also the last one to use space magic. The stands were specially created and have a feature. After the battle begins, the stands will be surrounded by a barrier so that magic doesn't get out. Even if it is broken, it will automatically recover. A perfect rehearsal ground in every way. Kyle was awed, and then asked, "Then we can use magic as much as we want, right?" "Of course, just try your best," Ryago replied, while Sykes looked on in disdain. Meanwhile, Freya was contemplative, as she wondered what the hall would be like if Kyle used all of his magic, as he would definitely use the same magic as when he destroyed the testing golem. Glacia ordered Kyle and Sykes to go on the stage, which they did, and asked if they had prepared their wands yet. Sykes replied, "Of course." He then brought out a sword, shocking the crowd, and mumblings began about it. Sykes was using a sword as a magic catalyst. It was a magic sword containing a fire spirit. The rare magic sword spirit was proof of the high expectations that his family entrusted to him. When Kyle displayed his wand, most of the crowd burst into laughter. It was a small wooden stick, and they mocked him, as expected from an F-class wand. The quality of the wand was very important in magic battles. A good wand would increase your power by many times. But Kyle had just a normal wooden stick. Glacia explained the rules of the game. "So I will explain the rules of the game. This stage is purely for training. So if you leave the stage, the damage you received will also be recovered. If you receive life-threatening damage, the damage will be forcibly ended. So please feel free to fight hard." The last sentence made Kitty and Delia scared and dismayed, as they wondered how they could be so carefree about that. Glacia continued explaining the rules, and the special condition of this battle: if Sykes loses, he will move to F-class. If Kyle loses, he will leave the academy. Victory is determined for one of you by either admitting defeat, unconsciousness, stage out, or being judged as too dangerous by the referee. The explanation is over. Do you guys have any questions? Neither Kyle nor Sykes had any questions. All right, then, right now, the magic battle with the Academy's approval between Sykes of A-class and Kyle of F-class will be held. The battle begins! Students from A-class started cheering Sir Sykes up. Give F-class a taste of A-class power. Delia cried out because he thought that everything was beyond imagination because of him. The battle started, and Turk was so interested in Sykes' sword, wondering if it was a magic sword. Sykes yelled at Kyle as they fought, asking how long he was going to be carefree like that. Sykes launched numerous fireballs at Kyle, but they all missed. Headmaster Raygot watched the battle and thought to himself that there was no way Sir Sykes would make such a mistake. Sykes was so frustrated when his fireballs missed, but then Raygot realized that it was not that Sir Sykes missed it, but it was Kyle who redirected the airflow around him and deflected all the balls. Headmaster Raygot wondered if Kyle was really in F-class. Sir Sykes realized that his fireballs did not hit because of the effect of the same wind magic Kyle used on Turk. Kyle then turned to Sir Sykes again. "That's interesting. Is that all?" Sir Sykes was taken aback by Kyle's question. Kyle continued, "I want to see the power of you, not the power of the sword." They continue with their battle, and Sykes launches another attack, the flame storm on Kyle, yelling at him that he could not dodge that particular attack. But then, Kyle countered his attack. Sykes yelled out again that his attack was much stronger. Headmaster Raygot, still fixed on the battle, wondered what Kyle did. The whirlpool and fire are covering the stands. Sykes yelled at Kyle, asking him what he was imitating. Kyle replied, "There is a little problem. Let me cover everyone's eyes. You showed me advanced magic, right? So I have to return it, right?" Kyle continued, "If it were you to deal with fire magic, then would you use water magic to freeze it? Disabling fire magic with water magic is the best choice." Sykes asked him a question, still holding onto his sword. "What are you, who only possesses wind magic, talking about?" Kyle replied, "I just came up with the right answer to that question. Fire magic." He continued, "Let me use it just like you." And with that, Kyle started showing his talent. The fight between Kyle and Sykes began with Kyle using wind magic to block the view of the audience, which included their classmates and teachers. This gave Kyle an advantage, as Sykes wasn't expecting it. Then, Kyle surprised Sykes again by using fire magic, showing that he could control more than one type of magic. Meanwhile, the audience couldn't see what was happening because of the wind magic. Some people, like the dormitory manager, thought the fight should be stopped. However, Kyle's teacher, Freya, disagreed. She believed Kyle was hiding the fight on purpose and suspected he was planning something powerful, even though she wasn't sure what exactly. As the fight went on, Sykes realized Kyle was much stronger than he seemed. Deciding not to hold back anymore, Sykes called upon the spirit inside his sword, which absorbed his magic. Flames from his hand shaped themselves into a dragon that wrapped around his sword, and he launched an attack with confidence, aiming to defeat Kyle. However, Kyle remained calm and decided it was time to reveal his true power. He summoned a giant blue flame that formed the shape of a wolf, which was even more powerful than Sykes' dragon. Sykes was shocked, realizing that Kyle's abilities were far more excellent than he had expected. Kyle calmly explained that the blue fire he had summoned was his true power. Sykes, still in shock, quickly realized that Kyle's blue flames were far hotter and more powerful than his own red fire. Filled with anger and pride, especially as the heir to the prestigious Marquis family, Sykes refused to accept defeat. Determined, he swung his sword at Kyle, hoping to turn the battle around. But Kyle, unfazed, commanded the massive blue flame in the shape of a wolf to swallow Sykes' fire effortlessly. As the wind and flames finally settled, the scene became clear to the watching crowd. To everyone's astonishment, Sykes was on his knees in front of Kyle, a clear sign of his defeat. The audience, which had been tense throughout the fight, was now stunned by this unexpected outcome. Sykes, boiling with frustration, couldn't believe how easily his most powerful magic had been overtaken by Kyle's incredible strength. Yet, Kyle remained cheerful and lighthearted, asking Sykes what he planned to do next. This surprised Sykes even more, as he couldn't understand how Kyle still had the energy to continue after unleashing such overwhelming power. Reluctantly, Sykes admitted that he had nothing left to give, finally accepting his loss. The crowd was left in awe as the dormitory manager officially declared Kyle the winner. While Kyle's classmates erupted in celebration, Freya, his teacher, quietly pointed out that Kyle hadn't even needed to destroy Sykes' magical sword, further emphasizing how much control he had over the situation. Still kneeling, Sykes felt a deep sense of frustration, blaming his own weakness for his loss. But Kyle, ever friendly, approached him, offering an apology and a smile. He then warmly welcomed Sykes to F class, congratulating him on a great match and encouraging him to grow stronger alongside him. Sykes, taken aback by Kyle's positive attitude, was struck by how genuine Kyle's words felt. Though he had always despised the idea of losing and hearing words of encouragement from others, this time, he felt differently. He began to see the potential of studying alongside someone as strong as Kyle and realized it could be a valuable opportunity to grow. With a newfound respect, Sykes expressed his hope to learn from Kyle. They shook hands, solidifying their new bond, and Kyle reassured him that he was more than willing to help him become stronger too. Sykes' classmates were upset by his loss and felt even more frustrated that he, a noble, had knelt before Kyle, who came from a commoner background. Despite their feelings of pride and disappointment, they couldn't deny the remarkable talent Kyle had shown during the battle. Even though they were reluctant to accept it, his abilities had left a strong impression on everyone who watched. As the crowd buzzed with conversation, one of the teachers approached Freya and asked her what she thought would happen now that Sykes was joining F class. Freya, known for her laid-back and unpredictable nature, admitted that she wasn't completely sure. However, she hinted that things were about to get interesting, especially with the upcoming extracurricular class. When pressed for more details, she simply smirked, refusing to give away her plans, and remarked that she was enjoying watching everything unfold. Meanwhile, far away from the excitement at the school, a mysterious figure stood on a cliff, watching the scene from a distance. This man, hidden beneath a hooded robe, spoke ominously to himself, as if plotting something dark. He hinted that the students were unaware of the larger forces at play, mentioning that they didn't realize they were being controlled. His voice carried a chilling warning. Soon, the nobles would suffer, their screams echoing as he vowed to destroy everything they cherished. With a twisted sense of purpose, he made it clear that no one would be spared from the chaos he intended to unleash. The following day in F class, Freya stood at the front of the room, teaching as usual, but her students were struggling to focus. Their attention kept drifting towards Sykes, who had recently joined them. The presence of a former Class A student made it hard for them to concentrate, and they were still in awe of what had happened the previous day. Once the class ended, the students moved outside for their practice session. Freya gave them simple instructions to start with target practice, beginning with basic aim. One of the students, Delia, nervously stepped forward, waving his wand as he tried to hit the target using a rock spell. But his attempt went wide, and the rock completely missed the target. Disheartened by his failure, Delia felt embarrassed and frustrated, and tears welled up in his eyes. He started crying, overwhelmed by the thought that he couldn't even handle the basics of magic. While Delia struggled, Kyle and Sykes stood out among the group. With almost no effort, they both hit their targets over and over again using their magic, each strike perfectly aimed. The rest of the students watched them in awe, impressed by how easily they handled the task. One boy, unable to contain his admiration, commented on how amazing Kyle and Sykes were. Even though Sykes had come from the prestigious Class A, Kyle was proving to be just as capable, showing that he was in no way inferior. The boy admitted that he had heard about their intense battle and confessed that the two of them were on a level far beyond the rest of the class, which made him feel nervous. Meanwhile, another student, Katie, attempted her spell, trying to create a water ball. However, her magic fizzled out, and the water burst before it even fully formed. Sykes quietly observed this and began to reflect on Kyle's abilities. He noted that Kyle's magic sense was incredibly sharp, allowing him to control his power with both precision and strength, something even students in Class A couldn't match. Inspired by Kyle's skill, Sykes made up his mind to train harder, intending to surpass Kyle in the future. He suggested that they should shift their focus to practicing long-range magic. However, before they could begin, Delia shyly approached Kyle asking for advice. Kyle, always friendly and approachable, encouraged Delia by suggesting that they practice together. He explained that casting magic effectively required understanding its different stages and honing each step. While Kyle patiently walked Delia through the process, Sykes remained quiet, watching from the sidelines. Delia tried again, this time hitting closer to the target, and Kyle praised him, offering helpful advice to aim directly at the center. Other students, noticing Kyle's teaching, began to gather around, curious and eager to learn. They asked him for guidance, and Kyle, full of enthusiasm, happily agreed to help them as well. As Kyle became the center of attention, teaching the other students, Sykes grew frustrated. Annoyed by the distractions and unwilling to waste time, he muttered under his breath that he had no interest in playing around and needed to focus on serious training. Without another word, he walked away to practice on his own. Freya, standing nearby, quietly watched Sykes leave, while the rest of the class gathered around Kyle, eager to learn from him. Katie felt a deep sense of discouragement as she thought about how she seemed to be holding everyone back. After class, she stayed behind at the indoor training grounds, determined to practice her magic. She began chanting "water ball" repeatedly, trying to get it right. As she focused, she recalled Kyle's earlier explanation about the 3 essential stages of casting magic: forming the spell, adjusting the amount of magic, and controlling the release. He had warned that if any part of this process was off, the magic would fail. He also advised that if magic didn't flow smoothly, chanting the spell's name could help strengthen the connection. By associating the right amount of magic with the chant, the spell would eventually work. Kyle had also mentioned something important. When magic is released, it creates an invisible thread of magical power. By carefully controlling that thread, they could guide the magic to do what they wanted. Katie repeated Kyle's instructions to herself, visualizing the water ball in her mind and focusing on increasing the power while chanting the spell's name. She concentrated hard, and to her excitement, the water ball began to form in front of her. But just as she thought she was succeeding, it suddenly popped, leaving her soaked. Frustration overwhelmed her as she wondered why everyone else could do it, but she couldn't. Feeling defeated, she began to cry. Out of nowhere, Kyle appeared, commenting on the spell, which startled Katie. She hadn't realized he was there and asked him how long he had been watching. Kyle casually explained that he was planning to practice too. He handed her a cloth to dry off, noticing she was drenched, and then, to her surprise, he pulled out a donut and offered it to her. Katie, confused by the gesture, asked about the many things he seemed to carry around, to which Kyle cheerfully agreed, joking that it was even better with black tea. Curious, Katie tried some and was amazed by how delicious it was. Kyle explained that the tea was imported by his father's company, adding to her surprise. After a while, Katie admitted to Kyle that she had followed his instructions but felt hopeless, convinced she had no talent for magic. Kyle disagreed, but Katie insisted that he didn't need to console her. Kyle, however, stood firm, telling her that he genuinely believed she had potential. He then asked if she would try casting her magic again so he could see it in action. Although nervous, Katie agreed, determined not to fail in front of Kyle. As they stood there, Katie couldn't help but blush at the thought of having a one-on-one practice session with him. She focused hard and successfully formed a water ball, but once again, it popped. Kyle looked puzzled and tried to figure out why the spell kept failing. After thinking it over, he realized that another force seemed to be interfering with Katie's magic the moment she released her power. Understanding the problem, he rummaged through his bag and eventually pulled out a ring. Slipping the ring onto her finger, Kyle explained that while she hadn't fully mastered mana control yet, the ring would temporarily help. He then encouraged her to try again, using the tip he had given her. Though flustered by the gesture, Katie followed his instructions. This time, the water ball remained stable. Kyle urged her to aim at the target and release the magic, and to her delight, she hit the target successfully. Kyle praised her for her effort, and Katie, feeling more confident, asked if she could continue practicing. Kyle happily agreed, glad to see her making progress. Meanwhile, Freya was observing them from behind a wall, quietly reflecting on how much influence Kyle was beginning to have on the class. She was impressed by how he had taken on a leadership role, helping his classmates improve. However, her thoughts shifted to Sykes, who was standing apart from the others. Sykes had been practicing his fire magic, and in frustration, he launched a fireball, accidentally setting a nearby tree on fire. Watching the flames, Sykes realized that his current power wasn't enough. He needed to grow stronger and fast. He knew that relying on his magic sword wouldn't be enough to reach the top. With the year's extracurricular lesson, a battle in the dangerous demon forest, looming ahead, Sykes was determined to push himself further and surpass his current limits. Hundreds of years ago, an academy teacher accomplished an extraordinary feat by defeating a powerful dungeon. Venturing deep into its heart, he successfully gained control over the dungeon by linking it to a magical item. This remarkable achievement gave rise to a dungeon entirely controlled by humans, a rare occurrence in the world. Since then, this dungeon has been used as a training ground for students, providing a unique opportunity to test their skills in a controlled environment. Rhaegot, one of the Academy's teachers, gathered all the first-year students and informed them of their upcoming challenges. He explained that they were required to conquer the dungeon, which was known as the Magic Forest. The students reacted with murmurs of surprise and worry, fearing the strong monsters that must inhabit such a place. However, Freya quickly reminded them that the dungeon was entirely controlled by humans, easing some of their concerns. She elaborated that the students would be entering the forest randomly by stepping into a magic circle. The dungeon had a mechanism that would automatically eject them after 6 hours, or if they managed to defeat the monster boss. Freya further explained that if any student took heavy damage during the mission or ran out of magic power, they could declare their withdrawal and would be pushed out of the forest immediately. Rhaegot then added that each student's progress would be tracked by a badge, which would serve as a battle diary. Every monster they defeated would earn them extra points, and their final rank in the training session would be based on their total score. He also mentioned that the students who placed first, second, and third in the rankings would be rewarded with prizes such as money, magical items, or high-level medals, encouraging them to strive for victory. Upon hearing this, some students became excited, especially those interested in the cash rewards. Kyle, on the other hand, was more curious about the magical items that might be offered. He eagerly asked his classmates what kinds of magical items they could expect to win. Before anyone could answer, Turk, a student from Class A, interrupted. He taunted them, saying they didn't need to worry about the top prizes since they would all be going to Class A anyway. Kyle, unfazed by Turk's arrogance, brought up an old issue and asked Turk if he was planning to apologize for injuring Delia in the past. Turk, however, refused to show any remorse, coldly stating that the state of F-Class was so pitiful that it wasn't even worth considering. Meanwhile, Sykes stood apart from the group, seemingly uninterested in the ongoing conversation. His isolation didn't go unnoticed, and Turk, seeing him alone, decided to approach him. Turk mocked Sykes, questioning why he continued to distance himself from the others, and suggesting that perhaps Sykes still hadn't gotten used to being in the so-called bottom of society class. He taunted Sykes further, bringing up his defeat in the duel against Kyle despite using the magic sword. Turk sneered, blaming Sykes for bringing shame to Class A, and asked how he planned to take responsibility for it. Sykes, keeping his composure, responded with a blank, icy stare, which startled Turk. Nervously, Turk backed off, asking if Sykes intended to hit him. But before the situation could escalate, another student, Kalyura Boldenheim, intervened. Kalyura told Turk to leave Sykes alone, reminding him that, despite being transferred to the lowest class, Sykes was still the heir to the Earl's family. While Kalyura acknowledged that Sykes might not have shown his true strength, his social status had not changed, and his position remained intact. Sykes, clearly annoyed, called out Kalyura's name. Kalyura tried to act innocent, but before he could respond, another student named Garden Multra arrived. Garden urged Kalyura not to make Sykes feel worse, pointing out that no matter how good Sykes' daily performance might be, he was still just seen as weak. As the other students observed the interaction, Delia whispered to Kyle that the top 3 students of the year had gathered. When Kyle asked what he meant, Delia explained that Sykes, Kalyura, and Garden were considered the top 3 freshmen of the year, but because of their family titles, they didn't seem to get along very well. Garden then told Sykes that it was fine for him to aim for the top prizes in the dungeon challenge, but made it clear that he and Kalyura would be taking first and second place. Sykes remained unfazed, coolly replying that they could do whatever they wanted. Seeing an opportunity, Turk continued to taunt Sykes, making snide remarks. Unexpectedly, Kyle stepped into the conversation, catching everyone's attention. Garden asked him why he had joined the group, and Kyle calmly replied that he was just checking if his friend was feeling uncomfortable. The students were shocked by Kyle's sudden involvement, but the real surprise came when Delia, filled with determination, rushed forward to stand in front of Sykes. He boldly declared that he wouldn't just stand by and let them bully his classmates. The tension in the air became awkward after Delia's outburst. Turk sneered, mocking them by saying that weak people love to play the friendship game. However, Sykes, clearly not in the mood, told Kyle and Delia to stop acting foolish and leave him alone, insisting they could do whatever they wanted without worrying about him. Before things could escalate further, the teachers shouted for everyone to stop arguing and gather in front of the magic circle. The students quickly assembled, and Raygot announced that the extracurricular lesson was about to begin. As they stood in the magic circle, they were teleported into the forest. Raygot's voice echoed through the forest, explaining that monsters would keep reappearing without limit, so the students should focus on defeating them. Kyle was teleported into the forest and immediately sensed the unique atmosphere around him. Feeling the magic energy in the area, he used his magic to assess the situation and realized that both monsters and students were nearby. He quickly sensed Katie's magic among a group of monsters and rushed to her aid. Meanwhile, Delia was relieved to find himself among other F-class students, but their relief was short-lived. Monsters surrounded them, and Delia began to worry that they were too close to the monster's lair. His classmates suggested they run away before the situation worsened. As they turned to flee, Delia tripped and fell, and a beast lunged toward him. Just before the creature could reach him, Sykes appeared, saving Delia from danger. At the same time, Kyle and Katie were busy fighting off monsters of their own. Kyle praised Katie for hitting her target with precision, and she thanked him for saving her. Kyle then reminded her that it was far too dangerous to be in the forest alone. Suddenly, they spotted Delia and the rest of their classmates running toward them. Kyle asked Delia about Sykes, and Delia explained that Sykes had stayed behind to hold off the monsters while telling them to run away. Pointing in the direction Sykes had gone, Delia expressed his concern, noting that there were just too many monsters and hoping that Sykes was okay. Sensing the danger Sykes was in, Kyle quickly turned toward that direction. Without wasting a moment, he began running, shouting for Sykes to hold on, reassuring him that he was coming to help. Sykes is fighting the monsters, but there are just too many of them for him to handle on his own. He gets injured but keeps going, casting a flame arrow spell using his wand. As the enemies keep closing in, he realizes that if they surround him any further, his chances of winning will vanish. He knows he needs to find a weak point to escape, but then a huge orc appears and attacks him. Sykes falls to the ground, and the other monsters seize the opportunity to attack, injuring him even more. He reflects on the situation, realizing that if he loses, he'll become a laughingstock for Kalyura and Garden. He also wonders if Delia and the others managed to run away, which leads him to question why he's even worried about them. Sykes remembers a moment with his father when they stood on a balcony together. His father told him that the heir to the Earl's family must always view the world from a higher position than others, reminding him to be stronger than anyone else and remain on top. These words became Sykes' guiding principle. Whenever he fought, he always aimed to be stronger and above his opponents. As Sykes thinks about Kyle offering his hand after their battle and saying they should get stronger together, he finds himself pinned down by some monsters. His thoughts drift to Kalura and Garden, whom he sees as just competitors, stepping stones for him to reach higher goals. Suddenly, the orc charges at him. Sykes reflects that ever since meeting the F-class students, something inside him has been different. The orc strikes him, and he collapses, coughing up blood. Feeling defeated, Sykes sees the orc raise its club to deliver another blow, but just then, it's attacked by wind magic. Kyle arrives behind Sykes and apologizes for being late. Sykes, surprised, asks why Kyle is there. Ignoring the question, Kyle notices Sykes is badly hurt and tells him to leave the rest to him. Kyle then unleashes a massive wave of magic power, allowing him to detect all the monsters in the area. Using his wind magic, he wipes them out in an instant. Sykes watches in disbelief as Kyle trounces a large number of monsters, wondering where Kyle's incredible magic power comes from. Just then, Delia and the others arrive, eager to join the fight. Delia looks around in confusion and asks where all the monsters went. Sykes, still surprised, asks why they came back. Delia apologizes, saying that abandoning friends and running away isn't the right thing to do. Sykes stares at them in shock. Katie steps forward and offers a healing potion, saying that if Sykes drinks it, his wounds will heal quickly. As Sykes stared at her without responding, Katie stammered, explaining that she was a bit clumsy, so she prepared extra supplies for the lesson. Kyle smiles warmly, commenting that it seems everyone was worried about Sykes and rushed to help him. Sykes reflects on his situation, reasoning that even if he attends the academy, he would still be walking his path alone as always. He believes that his classmates are just burdens, or chains, holding him back. In his mind, what he truly needs are strong individuals who can actually challenge him. However, when he looks at Kyle, Delia, and Katie, he sees them as more than just classmates. They are his friends. A warm smile spreads across his face as he sincerely thanks them for saving him. In response, they all appear genuinely happy. Kyle, filled with optimism, announces that once Sykes has fully recovered, they will defeat the final boss together and then return home. While Kyle's enthusiasm is apparent, both Delia and Katie seem uncertain about whether things will really go that smoothly. Meanwhile, in the heart of the forest, Garden, exhausted from battle, turns to Kalura and asks if they are genuinely facing the final boss. Kalura, equally drained, confirms that it is indeed the last boss. However, there is an unsettling realization. The boss is a type of monster that has the terrifying ability to absorb magic, something neither of them expected. Kyle, Sykes, Delia, and Katie observe from a distance. Delia points out that some students are already battling the last boss. He's shocked to see not just one, but two monsters. Delia then notes that these monsters are surrounded by A-class students, led by Kalura and Garden. Confidently, Sykes remarks that defeating the monsters is only a matter of time for those students, but Kyle isn't so sure, cautioning that things might not be that simple. In the heat of battle, Garden swings his sword at one of the monsters, but to his frustration, it has no effect. He turns to Kalura, admitting that the monsters are indeed absorbing magic power. Other students are hurling fireballs and water attacks at the creatures in desperation, but Kalura quickly stops them, warning that their magic is only helping the monsters recover. Faced with this dilemma, he wonders aloud how they can defeat such powerful beings. Even with wands in the form of weapons won't work, as their only way to fight effectively is by imbuing their bodies and weapons with magic power. Using a standard spear, or even Garden's magic axe, would be useless. Kyla then tells Sykes that the monsters are absorbing magic powers, but Sykes refuses to believe it, arguing that there's no way such creatures would be placed in a lesson. Kyla speculates if it might be Freya's doing, but quickly dismisses the idea, saying she wouldn't go that far. Despite his earlier confidence, Sykes grows concerned for Kalura and Garden. He decides to rush to their aid, but Delia tries to stop him, reminding him how they had spoken poorly of him in the past. Sykes, undeterred, replies that he is following the path of the old Delight family name, and it is his duty as someone of a higher position to act. His words leave everyone stunned. Kyle, seemingly unsurprised, comments that this is precisely what he expected from Sykes. He then tells Sykes to wait, as he has something to give back to him. Kyle pulls out Sykes' magic sword, and Sykes is taken aback. He remembers Kyle taking the broken sword after their last fight and asks if it's already been repaired. Kyle explained that while the sword still needed some final touches, he had planned to return it later. When Sykes unsheathes the blade, he's astonished by how shiny and refined it looks. Kyle then explains that if Sykes can share his power with the spirit dwelling in the sword, he'll become far stronger than he can imagine. A fire dragon emerges from the sword, glowing with a blue flame. Kyle reveals that this is a true fire dragon, and if Sykes gains the approval of this powerful spirit, his firepower will exceed all expectations. However, Kyle warns that because the spirit is growing stronger, Sykes might face difficulties in controlling it. Hearing this, Sykes speaks to the dragon, admitting that his weakness had hurt it, and apologizes. He acknowledges that he is still weak, but has cast aside his old arrogance. He vows to become strong, just like the fully transformed dragon. With newfound determination, Sykes begs the dragon to lend him its power again, promising that once he becomes stronger, they will continue to fight side by side. In response, the dragon swirls around Sykes, and he feels the power of transformation. As Delia and Katie look on in awe, Kyle reaches out his hand to Sykes and says, "Let's go." One of the monsters strikes Garden, sending him crashing to the ground, coughing up blood from the blow. In an attempt to help him, Kalyura lunges at the monster with his spear, but he gets injured too. Seeing this, the A-class students become terrified. Kalyura, realizing the danger, urges them to run. The students rush over to help, asking what is happening and why the extracurricular lesson has gone so horribly wrong. One student, while carrying Kalyura, scolds him for not informing them sooner, saying that's the reason they're wearing their badges, for situations like this. As the students hurry to evacuate the area, carrying both Kalyura and Garden, the monstrous creatures, referred to as the last bosses, raise their clubs to strike. This shocked the students, but Sykes and Kyle appeared in the nick of time. They quickly tell the others to stand back. One of the students notices the presence of F-class students and questions why they're there. However, Kalyura, more concerned about the monsters, warns Kyle and Sykes to be careful, reminding them that the monsters can absorb magic power. Kyle acknowledges Kalyura's warning, turning to thank him, but in that moment of distraction, one of the monsters seizes the opportunity and raises its club to strike Kyle. Sykes sees this and yells Kyle's name in alarm. In a flash, Kyle reacts, striking the monster with his bare hand and sending it crashing to the ground. The students, along with Sykes, are left stunned, unable to comprehend how Kyle countered the monster's attack with just his hand. As the monster rises again alongside its partner, Kyle calmly cracks his knuckles, looking unfazed and ready for action. "Let's begin," he says, signaling the start of the real battle. In the dungeon management and control room, the teachers are baffled by the strange situation unfolding before them. They watch in confusion across several screens, trying to make sense of what's happening. Rhaegot notices that the injured students haven't been evacuated, and there are monsters that absorb magic power, something they had no knowledge of. He recalls Freya and scans the room for her, wondering if she had planned something unusual for the lesson. To his shock, he spots her desperately trying to break a barrier using her magic. Concerned, Rhaegot and the dormitory manager rush over to her. Freya explains that the entire garden is surrounded by a powerful barrier. She admits that the boss monsters she prepared were supposed to be just 2 regular creatures. Even if she had made a mistake, she insists she never set up something as dangerous as the magic-absorbing monsters they are now facing. Hearing this, the dormitory manager grows frightened. Freya goes on to explain that someone has separated the students from them and transformed the monsters into something far more dangerous. The dormitory manager suggests using magic to forcibly evacuate the students from the forest, but Freya, still attempting to shatter the barrier, reveals that she has already tried that multiple times. No matter how many commands she sends, the magic tools in the center of the forest are completely unresponsive. Frustrated, Freya admits she feels helpless and fears this will become a major failure that will go down in the Academy's history. She then instructs Rhaegot to continue trying to jam the magic tools while she focuses on breaking the barrier. As she works, she apologizes to the students, feeling guilty for still having expectations of them in such a dangerous situation. But despite the circumstances, she hopes they can somehow hold on until she arrives. She silently places her trust in Kyle to help them survive. Meanwhile, back at the battle, Kyle strikes one of the monsters again, realizing that any attack containing even the slightest trace of magic will be absorbed by the creature. He figures out that the key to defeating the monster lies in a crystal embedded within its body. Kyle deduces that someone must have used the crystal to create the magic-absorbing monster. Determined, Kyle forms a plan. He strengthens his entire body with magic, carefully ensuring that not a single bit of magic leaks out as it flows from his muscles down to his bones. With his body fortified, he raises his fist and strikes the monster, aiming directly for the crystal. This time, his punch hits its mark, allowing him to dig his hand into the creature's body to reach the crystal. He then unleashes his storm fist, releasing a surge of magic power to shatter the crystal. As a result, the monster explodes, collapsing in defeat. Katie and Delia watch in amazement, astonished by Kyle's ability to take down the monster with his bare hands. They both marvel at his strength, saying how incredible it is that he was able to defeat such a powerful creature in such a way. Meanwhile, Sykes is struggling to deal with the second monster. Although he manages to wound it with his sword, the monster's magic ability allows it to heal quickly. His transformed sword contains too much magic power, and he can't reduce it to zero, leaving him unsure of how to proceed. As he tries to figure out a solution, Kyle calls out to him, advising that the monster's ability to absorb magic power shouldn't matter to Sykes. Kyle urges him to release all of his magic at once. Delia, confused, asks if the monster won't just absorb all the magic. But Sykes understands what Kyle means. He needs to attack the monster physically, not with magic. As Sykes prepares to launch his attack, Kyle watches with a knowing smile, reasoning that the best strategy is to first attack the monster physically. If that doesn't work, then the next step is to break the crystal inside using raw strength and finish it off with magic. Kyle continues to contemplate the plan, realizing that mages still have one more option in such situations. With renewed determination, Sykes calls upon the spirit residing in his magic sword to absorb all of his magic power. Delia and Katie are shocked as they see the blue flames surrounding Sykes grow stronger and stronger. Sykes remains focused, commanding the fire dragon to respond to his call and join him in battle. With a powerful slash, he sends a storm of magic power at the monster, overwhelming the crystal's ability to absorb magic. He strikes the monster with his sword, using Flare Saber, and the fire dragon unleashes a massive blaze, completely destroying the creature. Delia and Katie praise both Kyle and Sykes for defeating such a strange and powerful monster. However, Kyle remains unsettled. He notices that the students who had collapsed from exhaustion, run out of magic, or been defeated earlier still haven't been evacuated. This, along with the unnatural behavior of the monsters, deeply worries him. He begins to suspect that something bigger than just a disrupted lesson is at play. Suddenly, Kyle senses a dangerous presence approaching. Reacting quickly, he summons his magic to defend himself, but a massive wave of fire breaks through his wind and water shields, leaving him shocked. Just then, the mysterious man in the hooded robe from earlier appears, casually commenting that he's impressed the students were able to defeat the monsters. The students are stunned as Kyle steps forward, demanding to know who the man is. The hooded figure merely smirks and releases a dark magic orb from his hand, stating, "First things first." The orb rises into the sky, casting a shadow barrier over the area, making everything darker. Kyle immediately recognizes it as a trap, meant to keep them all confined. Outside the barrier, the teachers are finally making progress in breaking through. But the hooded man scoffs, saying that it's too late for them to intervene. Suddenly, skeleton hands begin to rise from the ground, followed by full skeletons. They surround the students, who stand frozen in shock. Kyle senses a more powerful and sinister energy at the center of the skeletal army. The hooded man introduces their new foe, the Lich King, ruler of the undead. Delia, Katie, and Sykes collapse, writhing in pain, likely affected by the miasma, the dark energy radiating from the Lich King. The hooded man mocks them, saying he's eager to hear their cries of despair. Despite his weakened state, Sykes struggles to stand, determined to fight the skeletons. However, Kyle steps forward, summoning a wall of light to shield everyone. He faces the Lich King directly, declaring that he doesn't care about the king's title or power. Spreading the light with both hands, Kyle warns the Lich King that if he dares to harm his friends, there will be no mercy. Inside the dark confines of the shadow barrier, Kyle found himself face to face with the Lich King, the dreaded ruler of the undead. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and all around them loomed the massive, eerie army of zombies poised to strike at their master's command. But Kyle stood his ground, his expression unwavering, not a trace of fear in his eyes. The Lich King noticed this, and for a moment seemed surprised. Then he burst into a prideful laugh as Kyle told him coolly that he wouldn't be holding back. Mocking him, the Lich King gestured toward the sea of the undead surrounding them and sneered, "What could you possibly do?" The dead groaned and shifted, their hollow eyes glowing. But Kyle remained calm. His gaze swept over the army as he answered boldly, not missing a beat. He had long ago thought about how to defeat them, and would do it now. With a sudden surge of power, Kyle gathered his magic, the air crackling as energy formed in his hands. The Lich King let out another laugh, incredulous. "Are you planning to finish off all these souls in a single attempt?" He looked down on Kyle, dismissing him as a mere child. "You're just a kid playing pretend," he mocked, his voice dripping with scorn. But Kyle didn't flinch. Instead, his eyes sharpened, and his voice rang out clear and unwavering. He knew the zombies' weakness, and it was time to end this. Before the Lich King could even react, Kyle unleashed his magic. A brilliant light erupted from his hands, illuminating the battlefield as if the sun itself had descended. The blast struck the undead army with such force that the ground shook, and in seconds, the entire horde was reduced to dust. Light, zombies' greatest weakness, had obliterated them all in the blink of an eye. The Lich King stood frozen, his disbelief clear as he struggled to process what had just happened. His once unstoppable army was gone, destroyed by the very power he had ridiculed. He could hardly believe that a mere teenager had summoned such strength and ended it all in less than a minute. As the light faded and the shadow barrier lifted, the other students erupted in cheers. Kyle had done it again. He had saved them all. They marveled at how composed he had been throughout, his mastery of magic and his unshakable coolness in the face of danger, leaving them in awe. For Kyle, though, it was just another day of facing the impossible and winning. Meanwhile, from the shadows, Sykes watched Kyle, his mind racing with thoughts of how far behind he was in terms of power. The gap between them felt immense. Kyle, satisfied with his effort, turned back to face the Zombie King, this time with a confident smile. "So," Kyle asked, "what are you going to do now that I've defeated your army so easily?" But the Zombie King had more tricks up his sleeve. With a blast that shook the entire forest, he began to morph, his form twisting into something otherworldly, the true form of the Lich King. The remaining students gasped in disbelief. They had all but thought him defeated. The Lich King sneered at Kyle, mocking him. "Your magic isn't nearly strong enough to affect me," he said, though he admitted that Kyle's earlier display had caught him off guard. Even if dozens of clerics gathered together, they couldn't have summoned light magic on that scale. "But," he added with a cruel laugh, "it didn't work on me. What a shame to see the full extent of your power fall short." The students were paralyzed with uncertainty. Was Kyle really going to win? Could he? Meanwhile, Sykes was deep in thought, analyzing the situation. His studies had taught him that when a powerful mage accepts death and succumbs to darkness, they transform into a lich. But there was something even more terrifying, the being standing before them now. This was no ordinary lich. This was something far greater. Sykes murmured to himself, "I can't believe we're facing a legendary monster only spoken of in ancient texts." At the same time, two other students noticed the forest around them starting to rot. Panic crept into their voices as they raised concerns about what was happening. The Lich King laughed, convinced that victory was finally his, but he hadn't anticipated what happened next. Suddenly, a blast of energy struck him, and the Lich King screamed in agony as his magic power was sealed. Stunned, he looked around to find the source and saw Kyle standing calmly, watching him. "I created a barrier," Kyle said, "because I didn't want you destroying any more of the forest." A smile spread across Kyle's face as he added, "Your strong magic, wasn't that just a test for me?" The Lich King, enraged and bewildered by Kyle's composure, thought to himself that this boy must have some sort of mental problem. Even in the face of danger, Kyle was smiling while the students looked on in awe and disbelief. Overcome with fury, the Lich King declared, "I'll show you the true extent of my power." He unleashed a dark fire spell, magic so dangerous it couldn't be extinguished until it burned everything in its path. But before the flames could reach them, Kyle moved swiftly, executing something so strange that the Lich King had to stop and ask, "What did you just do?" Kyle, with a dark smile, responded, "I've condensed all the magic power of the Land of the Light into a single point." The Lich King was stunned. He couldn't believe that Kyle had managed to condense such immense power in such a short amount of time. Desperately, the Lich King commanded his dark magic to consume Kyle's light, but it was too late. Kyle unleashed the concentrated magic, creating a massive pillar of light that pierced through the darkness, shattering the Lich King's magic and destroying his form completely, leaving only the nucleus behind. As the dust settled, Kyle approached the nucleus and picked it up. Standing over the remnants of the Lich King's power, Kyle turned his gaze to a figure in a red cape watching from a distance. The figure grimaced, clearly displeased at being bested once again. Kyle raised an eyebrow and, with a smirk, asked, "So what are you going to do next?" As the scene unfolded before him, the man in the robe was visibly shaken. He couldn't believe what he was witnessing. The light from Kyle's ultimate magic circle had obliterated the entire zombie army in mere seconds, erasing even the Lich King, the ace he had so confidently brought into battle. His mind raced. How could someone like this exist at the academy? He had never heard of anyone possessing such monstrous power. Kyle's voice cut through his thoughts, snapping him back to reality. "So, what are you going to do now?" Kyle asked, his tone calm, yet challenging. The robed man trembled, unwilling to accept that it could all end here. Desperation crept in. He smacked himself to regain control, then demanded, "What's your name, boy?" He needed to know the name of the cheeky-faced teen who had bested him so effortlessly. With a composed expression, Kyle introduced himself, even adding that he was just a first-year student at the Magic Academy. The man grimaced, clearly irritated. "I'll remember that name," he muttered, his eyes narrowing. He reached into his robe and pulled out what looked like a crystal. Upon closer inspection, it was a magic teleportation stone. Kyle, recognizing the danger, quickly shouted, "I won't let you do that!" In a split second, he fired off a magic bullet, hitting the man squarely. The impact knocked him down, and as his hood fell back, Kyle and the other students caught a glimpse of his face. Shock washed over them. They had barely begun to process what they saw before the man in the robe sneered, "I'll be back. Remember me." Then, in an instant, he vanished, leaving them stunned. It was only after he disappeared that they realized something strange. There had been a magic stone embedded in the man's face. Relief swept over the students, and they rushed to Kyle, some of them in tears. Overcome with gratitude, they thanked him for saving their lives. Kyle, ever modest, simply smiled and said, "It's good that everyone's safe." Just then, they spotted two teachers running toward them. One of them, Miss Freya, caught Kyle's attention. "Miss Freya, you're hurt!" Kyle exclaimed, concern etched on his face. Miss Freya waved him off with a gentle smile. "I'm fine. I'm just relieved that you're all safe," she said. "I feared the worst." The other teacher, Ray Gott, approached Kyle with a serious expression. "Who was that man in the robe? The one we saw earlier?" Kyle explained that the man seemed to be the mastermind behind the attack, though he had managed to escape. "He was the one controlling the monsters," Kyle added, pointing to the corpses that littered the ground. Ray Gott looked startled, his gaze shifting between Kyle and the remains of the creatures. Did you defeat them? The magic-absorbing monsters?" Kyle nodded and Sykes stepped forward to confirm. "Yeah, we took care of them together." Ray was about to probe further, ready to demand details on how two students had defeated such powerful enemies, but Miss Freya quickly intervened. "Let's focus on saving the rest of the students first. We can ask questions later," she said firmly. As the battle reached its conclusion, the forest around them began to heal. The once corrupted landscape returned to its natural beauty, and the injured students scattered throughout the area were slowly being moved by the forest's magic. Sykes, realizing that his own magic reserves were almost completely drained, watched as he too would soon be transported away. With a sigh, he prepared himself, saying his goodbyes. Just as he was about to be whisked away, Kyle suddenly jumped on him, catching both Sykes and teacher Ray Gott off guard. "What are you doing, Kyle?" Ray asked, clearly surprised by his sudden action. Kyle, grinning, replied, "Today's been tough, but we made it through together. I think we deserve to walk back while talking about what happened. I'd prefer to reflect on everything as a group rather than be separated like this." Teacher Ray Gott, shaking his head, was quick to shut down Kyle's request. No, Kyle. There are still monsters in the forest. I have to contact headquarters and have you all forcibly evacuated for your own safety. His voice left no room for debate. But Kyle wasn't ready to give up. Turning to Miss Freya, he asked for support. Her eyes gleamed with pride as she watched the students. She could see the camaraderie that had developed among them through the trials of the day. Miss Freya spoke up. She told Ray that they had earned it. They've all been through so much, and it's clear that today's battle has forged a bond between them. I don't see any harm in allowing them to walk back together as long as we're watching over them. Ray seemed to mull over her words before finally turning to the students. Is this what you all want? He asked, scanning their faces. All the students nodded eagerly. They had fought together, survived together, and it only felt right to end the day side by side. Reluctantly, Ray relented. Fine, you four, Kyle, Sykes, Katie, and Delia of F class can walk back together. But you'll be under constant supervision. He contacted headquarters, notifying them of the plan and ensuring that they wouldn't be forcibly moved like the others. Just as the group began to relax, thinking the ordeal was over, the teachers delivered one final blow of bad news. Since the battle log malfunctioned, the events of today will be considered invalid. Ray God informed them with a heavy sigh. What? The students exclaimed, unable to hide their frustration. They had defeated a powerful boss, only for the record to fail them in the end. Ray sighed again but tried to reassure them. Don't worry, I'll take full responsibility. I'll make sure the Academy knows the truth. You all fought well, and that won't be forgotten. With the news sinking in, Kyle turned to Sykes, giving him a determined look. I'm lending you my shoulder to lean on. It's been a rough day for both of us. Let's walk back together. Sykes, initially hesitant, eventually smiled and accepted the offer. All right, Kyle, I'll count on you. As they began their walk back, Miss Freya observed them with a smile. She was proud of how much they had grown and knew that they would only continue to grow from here. Upon returning to the academy, Miss Freya informed Kyle that the principal wanted to meet with him to hear a detailed account of the day's events. I know you're tired, but the principal is expecting you. Please stop by later, she said gently. As Kyle approached the principal's office, he wondered what kind of person the head of the academy would be. The principal was rumored to be the most powerful person in the academy, and Kyle was eager to meet him. He knocked on the door and a deep voice from inside said, "Come in." Stepping inside, Kyle found himself face to face with the academy's president, who introduced himself as Taratarius. I currently hold the position of president. Kyle was awed. The president was known for his mastery of 3 elemental attributes: water, wind, and earth. Wasting no time, the president asked him, "How did you defeat the monsters? And what happened between you and the man in the cape?" Kyle hesitated, wondering how he could explain everything without revealing his light magic. Just as he was contemplating his response, a familiar voice interrupted, telling him that he didn't need to hide anything. Kyle looked up in surprise to see Master Milna standing there. "Master Milna? What are you doing here?" he asked in shock. The principal smiled and explained, "She's an old friend of mine. I've heard a lot about you from her." Master Milna stepped forward and spoke directly to Kyle. "I'd like you to take over an investigation concerning the Academy's seal." Kyle's eyes widened in surprise, realizing that this task would be far more than he had ever expected. Master Milna's expression turned serious as she addressed Kyle. "Deep in the basement of the Academy," she began, her voice low and steady, "a powerful magic chain seals a magic beast. It used to be a dragon before." Kyle's eyes widened in disbelief. He stammered, "A dragon? In the Academy?" He found it nearly impossible to wrap his mind around the idea of such a creature being so close. Dragons were the stuff of legend, not something you would expect hidden beneath an academy. Master Milna nodded. "Yes, and it said that it would burn anyone who dared set foot on that land." Kyle was dumbfounded. He had heard tales of dragons, but never once did he imagine he would encounter one, let alone learn that such a beast lay beneath the very school he attended. Sensing his shock, she continued, "Besides, something seems to be hiding there. Something tied to where that seal exists. It's also the place where he learns." Kyle paused, his mind racing. "He learns?" he murmured before his face lit up with realization. "You mean the F study hall?" Milna nodded, confirming his deduction. "Yes, you're correct. The F study hall is the entrance to the seal. The building is covered with powerful magic, which is why it's never been rebuilt. Kyle's jaw dropped in awe. So that's why the study hall's in such bad shape. I thought it was just because F-class got stuck with the worst of the worst, but now I understand. Before Kyle could process the enormity of the revelation, Principal Taratarius interjected. "There's a problem, though," he said, his tone grave. "Before we can investigate further, we must first find the entrance to the seal itself. Unfortunately, we don't know its exact location." Master Milna chimed in. Her tone was thoughtful. The seal possesses a very strong source of magic power, and the form of the current is just a cover to conceal the seal from above. However, after interference from two separate magic sources, the entrance has been moving frequently. Master Milna's eyes darkened as she recalled her last encounter with the beast. "The last time I investigated, the dragon was completely covered in miasma. Its form was barely recognizable beneath the cloud of darkness." The principal cut in, attempting to reassure them both. "You don't need to worry about the dragon itself. It's bound tightly by the magic chain. Our main focus should be preventing that chain from weakening any further. That's the purpose of this investigation." Kyle took a deep breath, processing all he had learned. A dragon, sealed beneath the academy. A powerful magic chain keeps it in check. And now, the potential weakening of that chain is threatening the safety of everyone in the school. He looked up, a glint of determination in his eyes. "This actually sounds really interesting," Kyle declared with a grin. "Leave the investigation to me. I'll take care of it." Master Milna smiled approvingly, her pride evident in her eyes. The principal, on the other hand, looked both surprised and impressed by Kyle's confidence. "Very well," Taratarius said, his voice calm but firm. "The Academy will place its trust in you, Kyle. Be careful. This isn't just some ordinary task. If the chain weakens too much, we'll be dealing with something far more dangerous than we've ever faced." Kyle nodded, already feeling the weight of the responsibility and the excitement. This wasn't just another magical duel or training exercise. This was something bigger, something that could change everything. As he left the principal's office, his mind buzzed with thoughts of what lay ahead. The seal, the dragon, and the mysterious magic chain. Everything seemed to connect to the F study hall, and it was his job to ensure the safety of the academy by keeping that chain intact. The world he thought he knew had suddenly grown much larger, and he couldn't help but feel that his journey had only just begun. After discussing the investigation about the academy's seal, the conversation shifted back to the original purpose of Kyle's meeting with the principal, recounting the events of the day. Kyle, now relieved he didn't have to hide anything, told the principal everything, from the sub-level monsters to his intense battle with the Lich King and the mysterious man in the cape. As Kyle narrated the sequence of events, the principal listened intently, his expression growing more contemplative with each detail. After hearing the full account, the principal stood up, his face filled with solemn gratitude. Without warning, he bowed deeply toward Kyle. "Thank you for everything you've done to save the students and protect this academy," he said, his voice laced with sincere respect. Kyle was caught off guard by the gesture and immediately felt uncomfortable. He waved his hands in protest, his cheeks flushing in embarrassment. "Please, you don't need to bow. I was just doing what anyone would do. I couldn't just stand by and let them suffer." But the principal wasn't finished. Straightening himself, he turned to Master Milna with a thoughtful look. "What could we do to make Kyle happy? He deserves a reward for his efforts," the principal asked quietly. Milna leaned in and whispered something in his ear, and a smile slowly spread across the principal's face. "Kyle," he announced, "in recognition of your bravery and service, I will grant you one wish, anything you desire, whenever you choose to ask for it." Kyle blinked in surprise, a wide smile slowly forming on his face. "Thank you, sir. That's an incredible gift." The principal nodded, satisfied. "You've earned it. For now, rest. Tomorrow we will introduce you to the teacher in charge of investigating the academy's seal. I believe their assistance will be invaluable to you." With that, Kyle was excused from the office, and he walked out into the dimly lit hallway, still processing the weight of the day's events. As he descended the grand staircase leading away from the principal's office, a pair of unseen eyes watched him closely from the shadows. Kyle quickly made his way back to his friends, who were eagerly awaiting his return. The moment he stepped into the common area, they rushed up to him, their faces a mixture of excitement and curiosity. "Kyle, what did the principal want?" one of them asked. Before he could answer, two familiar figures, Calura and Garden, joined the group. Kalura, her usual confident expression softened, stepped forward. Is it true that you and Sykes defeated all those magic-absorbing monsters? Kylie chuckled and nodded. Yeah, it's true. Sykes and I worked together to take them down. Both Kalura and Garden exchanged glances before turning back to him, their attitudes noticeably different from before. Thanks for saving us. And the others too, Kalura said, her voice quiet. She hesitated for a moment before adding, And, sorry for being rude before. Garden, not wanting to be left out, tried to play it cool. Yeah, I wasn't worried at all back there, but thanks. And I guess I should apologize too. Kyle smiled at them both, shaking his head. Don't worry about it. We're all part of the same academy, right? It's only common sense to help each other. The group of students around them began asking more questions, eager to hear the details of Kyle and Sykes' victory. Kalura and Garden joined in, curious about the battle as well. So, how did you do it? How'd you manage to beat those monsters? Someone asked. Meanwhile, back in the principal's office, Teratarius sat back in his chair, deep in thought. He couldn't help but wonder about Kyle. This boy who had suddenly risen to such prominence, seemingly out of nowhere. He had put Kyle in charge of the Academy SEAL investigation, but something about this decision still weighed on his mind. Was Kyle truly ready for such a task? After a long pause, the principal finally nodded to himself. He had already decided on the teacher who would assist Kyle, and he hoped she would rise to the occasion. There was no one else better suited for the job after all. Far across the academy, in the magical research tower, the teacher in question was busy at work. Miss Relicia, a rather eccentric but brilliant magic researcher, was once again absorbed in her latest experiment. Her lab was filled with odd bubbling potions, stacks of ancient tomes, and an assortment of magical tools. "I've got it, Eliza," she exclaimed, holding up a vial filled with a strange glowing liquid. "I've just discovered a new combination of ingredients. This potion will be revolutionary." Her assistant, Eliza, sighed as she cleaned up the mess left behind from Relicia's previous experiments. "That's what you said last time. And the time before that," she muttered under her breath. Though there was a hint of fondness in her voice, she had grown used to Relicia's chaotic methods and her endless enthusiasm. Back in private, Kyle gathered his friends and relayed the events that had transpired in the principal's office. His voice was calm but carried the weight of the task ahead. He told them, "My teacher is an acquaintance of the principal," and went on to explain how he had been entrusted with a mission, one that would uncover the secret seal of the academy. "So, they asked you to investigate the academy's secret seal?" one of his friends asked, still not fully believing what they had heard. Kyle nodded, his expression serious. He took a breath and said, "Let's all solve the academy's riddle." Immediately, the atmosphere shifted. Though there was excitement in the air, there was also apprehension. Investigating the academy's most well-kept secret wasn't something to take lightly. His friends began asking questions, wanting to understand more about what they were getting themselves into. "Are there any dangers involved? What exactly are we going to be dealing with?" one of them asked, eyes narrowing as they contemplated the risks. Kyle answered honestly, telling them everything the principal had revealed. "The inside of the seal has become a maze, and it's very likely there are monsters along the way," he said, his voice steady. The thought of monsters lurking within the maze sent a wave of nervous tension through the group, but Kyle remained composed. "At the end of the maze, there's a sealed dragon." His tone was matter-of-fact, as if the presence of a dragon was nothing to be too concerned about. "But all that isn't a problem," he added confidently. The others exchanged looks, unsure whether to feel reassured or even more worried. A maze filled with monsters and a dragon at the end of it? It sounded like something straight out of a legend. Could they really handle it? While Kyle's words hung in the air, Sykes, who had been quietly reflecting, suddenly spoke up. His voice was filled with determination as he said, "After that battle in the forest, I feel stronger than ever before." His fists clenched at his sides, and there was a fire in his eyes. "I want to test out my strength in real combat," he declared, a grin forming on his face. His resolve was unshakable. He then turned to Katie and Delia, nodding at them. "You two overcame that battle as well. You should have more confidence in yourselves," he said. His words seemed to awaken something in them, a reminder of their own strength. Though hesitant at first, both Katie and Delia exchanged a look of silent agreement. After a bit more convincing, the decision was made. They would all join Kyle in the investigation. The team was now formed, ready to face whatever lay ahead. With excitement, Kyle declared, "The investigation SEAL team has finally been formed!" Just as the group felt the surge of determination coursing through them, Kyle suddenly noticed something odd. Outside of the wind soundproof wall they had erected for their private discussion, there seemed to be someone trying to get their attention. He hadn't noticed it before, but now it was clear. Someone was trying to speak to them. Curious, Kyle quickly undid the wind wall, and the sounds of the outside world rushed in. A girl's voice cut through the air. "What happened?" Kyle asked, as soon as the barrier was down. "You finally noticed me," the girl replied, her tone half annoyed but with a hint of amusement. She looked at the group, arms crossed, clearly having been trying for some time to get through to them. "I've been trying to talk to you, but you guys didn't hear me," she said, shaking her head in mild frustration. Kyle felt a little embarrassed, realizing how long they had left her outside. He quickly apologized. "We were having a secret discussion, and that's why we put the soundproof wall up." The girl raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "A secret discussion?" she repeated, her curiosity piqued. "Is it related to the Academy's secret?" she asked boldly. The group froze, eyes widening in shock. How did she know? They had been so careful, and yet this girl had figured it out. The tension in the air was palpable as they stared at her in disbelief. She, however, simply laughed. "Oops, I forgot to introduce myself," she said, realizing her mistake. She then gave a small bow, her demeanor shifting. "I'm Eliza, a third-year student with a wind attribute," she explained. Her tone was calm but friendly. "I'm actually here because I have a message from Professor Relizia Neve, the alchemy professor." She then focused her gaze on Kyle and asked, "You're Kyle, right?" When Kyle confirmed that he was, she smiled. "The teacher is waiting at the research column. She asked me to bring you there," Eliza explained. Suddenly, it clicked for Kyle. This must be the professor the principal had mentioned, the one he was supposed to meet. Without hesitation, he agreed to go with her. As Kyle stood up, ready to leave, the rest of the group did the same, eager to accompany him. Eliza noticed this and raised a brow. "Are they coming too?" she asked, looking a bit surprised. Kyle simply nodded. "I already told them about the secret. They'll be helping me with the investigation," he said confidently. Eliza didn't seem to mind. She shrugged and said, "It's all good. Professor Relizia isn't someone who would be bothered by things like that." Her casual tone set the group at ease, and they all thanked her for allowing them to tag along. As they walked through the academy grounds toward the research column, the group couldn't help but marvel at the structure ahead. Towering high into the sky, it was a grand and imposing building unlike anything they had ever seen. Sykes, ever the one to speak his thoughts aloud, couldn't hold back his amazement. "So this is a research column?" he exclaimed, his eyes wide as he stared up at the spiraling tower. The others nodded in agreement, echoing Sykes' awe. None of them had ever imagined that the academy housed such an impressive place. Eliza chuckled at their reactions and said, "It's because few first-year students come here." Once they reached the entrance, their attention shifted to the seemingly endless spiral of stairs inside the tower. One by one, they gazed upward, wondering if they would have to climb all the way to the top. Eliza noticed their concern and reassured them with a smile. "Don't worry, we'll be taken up there by magic power." True to her word, they felt the surge of magical energy lift them as they ascended the tower. They were halfway up when a sudden deafening boom echoed through the halls. Eliza's face instantly paled, and she let out a panicked scream. "That's the professor!" she cried. "She's probably made a mess again." The group rushed toward the source of the explosion, and as they entered the lab, the scene that greeted them was one of pure chaos. Books were scattered across the floor, potions had been spilled, and amidst the wreckage was Professor Relizia herself, sprawled on the ground, looking slightly dazed. Eliza sighed in exasperation. "Professor, I told you not to do any research today. We have guests," she scolded. The professor blinked up at her in confusion. "Guests? Oh, right," she muttered, clearly having forgotten. Eliza's frustration was evident as she reminded her, "The principal told you about this beforehand, remember?" The professor, still on the floor, bowed deeply in apology. "I'm sorry, I forgot," she exclaimed. Eliza turned red with embarrassment. "Stop that! You're making me look like some scary person," she said, flustered. Professor Relizia, with a playful smile, said, "But you are a bit scary." Eliza sighed, clearly tired of dealing with the professor's antics. She began cleaning up the mess, but Kyle stepped forward, offering his help. With a wave of his hand, he used his magic to restore order to the room, placing books back on the shelves, repairing broken items, and cleaning up the spills. Katie assisted him, pointing out areas he had missed. The professor watched in amazement. "You're incredible!" she exclaimed, rushing over to Kyle. She began bombarding him with questions, her curiosity about his magical abilities getting the better of her. Eliza had to intervene, pulling the professor away before she overwhelmed Kyle with her excitement. Later, the professor apologized for her earlier behavior, hoping that Kyle didn't think less of her for it. Kyle, ever kind, reassured her. "It's fine, I understand," he said with a smile. His calm demeanor left Eliza wondering if perhaps Kyle and the professor were more alike than they seemed. Finally, after the chaos had subsided, Kyle introduced himself properly. "I'm Kyle from Class 1F, he said. "I hope you'll help me with the investigation." The professor blinked, seemingly forgetting about the investigation. Eliza had to remind her. "The Dragon Seal investigation," she prompted. The professor's expression turned serious as she reached for a thick tome. "The Dragon Seal is the biggest and oldest riddle in this academy," she said gravely. She paused, looking Kyle directly in the eyes. "I've risked my life researching it before." When they confirmed it, she told them that she was going to tell them everything she had investigated thus far. But in exchange, he had to give her all the information he had. With their mission clear, Kyle and his friends prepared for the investigation ahead. The previous night, in the principal's office before Milna left, Milna and the principal discussed the great power of darkness starting to move. Milna expressed her worries about the Cape Man. The principal informed her that there were spies in the academy and that the investigation would be very dangerous because of this. Still, she told him not to worry and to believe in Kyle, someone who could use all 4 attributes and the only disciple she had ever accepted to teach. When Professor Relizia received Kyle's information about the seal's location, her reaction was one of pure disbelief. "I can't believe it," she screamed, her voice echoing in the chamber. The revelation that the entrance to the seal was in the F-study hall was shocking. Kyle nodded in agreement. "Yes, I was also very surprised," he replied, trying to match her astonishment. Relicia began to pace back and forth, her mind racing. "It makes sense, though," she said, her tone becoming more focused. "Other than the form teacher, no one else is allowed into that study hall. It's a restricted area." Her eyes lit up with a sudden realization. Without warning, she dashed off toward a storage alcove, her movements quick and purposeful. "Eliza, it's finally time for that magic fool to be useful," she exclaimed. Eliza, who had been watching with a mix of curiosity and concern, responded with a puzzled, "Teacher, you mean?" Her eyes followed Relicia's frantic search. Relicia's face broke into a grin as she confirmed, "Yes, the final weapon of the seal investigation." She pulled out a pair of magical glasses from a hidden compartment. These weren't ordinary glasses. They had the ability to expose hidden entrances by revealing magical energy. The revelation was met with excitement and relief. The magical glasses would be instrumental in finding their way through the maze without aimlessly wandering around the entire academy.